It's our delight today to share with you Beinecke's Ottoman Turkish manuscript collections and the project we've been collaborating on to catalog them. I am joined by Professor Özgen Felek, Lector of Ottoman in Near Eastern Languages and Civilizations here at Yale, and by Ayşe Çiçek Ünal, PhD candidate in history, likewise here at Yale. And what we'd like to do today is first, I'll properly introduce my dear colleagues, then give some context for the collection and the cataloging project. Then I'll turn the conversation over to Ayşe and Özgen with some prompting questions. So first, to our panel. In her role as Lector of Ottoman, Dr. Özgen Felek teaches Ottoman language and literature. Her teaching and research interests also include gender, sexuality, and Sufism in the Ottoman Empire. Professor Felek holds a very intimidating 2 PhDs, one from Ferit University in Turkey and another from the University of Michigan. And if that wasn't impressive enough, she is also an accomplished artist of Islamic illumination and miniature painting. Ayşe Çiçek Ünal is a PhD candidate in history. She's currently based in the Netherlands, where she's pursuing wonderful dissertation research on 17th century Ottoman North Africa and the early modern Mediterranean, with an emphasis on the cultural and commercial exchanges between Europe and the Ottoman provinces. Before doing marvelous work for us at Beinecke, she previously cataloged manuscripts at the Süleymaniye Library in Istanbul. And we'll hear from both Ayşe and Özgen in a moment, but first I wanted to give you some context. Beinecke holds about 600 Ottoman Turkish manuscripts. And what we mean by that are manuscripts produced within the Ottoman Empire and written in Ottoman Turkish, which is an early version of modern Turkish with many Arabic and Persian loanwords. To give you 2 examples, the 2 you see on screen now give you a rough sense of chronological spread. There's a mid-15th century Iskandername on the left, which is a copy of the Alexander Romance. And this Berat, which is an imperial degree, was produced in Istanbul in 1896. And having put these slides together, I've since learned that we actually have an even later one, that we have a manuscript copied in Ottoman Turkish in 1933, which actually postdates the language reform. But in any case, this gives you kind of a rough sense of both the earliest and the latest of our Ottoman manuscripts, but also a rough sense of the chronology of the empire itself, though the empire does slightly precede the Turkish MSS Supplement 25. And I should note that manuscripts were produced in many other languages within the empire during its existence. So one obvious example are the Qurans that are identifiably Ottoman, but would have remained in Arabic. They're just identifiable as Ottoman productions by their style of decoration, and those happen to be cataloged within other collections. There are also, for instance, Armenian church service books whose production is locatable to Istanbul, though again, they're part of other collections. And really our cataloging project is focused on Ottoman productions in Ottoman Turkish, though even within that, you can see that this linguistic mixing very vividly in Turkish MSS 3, whose language is Ottoman Turkish, but whose script is Armenian. And these Turkish manuscripts form part of Beinecke's amazing holdings in Islamic manuscripts. As Tobias mentioned, I am trained in the European Middle Ages, and it's been just an absolute joy to discover these collections through work on this cataloging project and on related endeavors. I can't overstate how incredible these are, and have learned that at somewhere over 4,000 manuscripts, Yale holds the 3rd largest collection of these materials in the country. Now, this will give you a rundown of what all of those are, and you can see that the majority is Arabic, but the Turkish collection, by comparison, is small, but nonetheless mighty. Turkish manuscripts started arriving at Yale with the donation by Edward Elbridge Salisbury of his extensive personal library in 1870. Salisbury was America's first professor of Arabic and Sanskrit literature and language, receiving that appointment in 1841. And while he didn't read Turkish himself, there were a small number of Turkish manuscripts in his collections, including the passport of an Ottoman pasha that you see on the right. Our Turkish manuscripts are divided into 3 collections, as you can see on in this list, and the most recent large acquisition came from the Hartford Seminary in 2005. And as you'll hear, these materials cover many genres from science and religion to literature and politics. We have about 600 Ottoman manuscripts, and you'll notice from these notes that when we started cataloging in September of 2022, one of them was discoverable in the catalog. Some had working notes, some had printed catalog cards, but generally speaking, these were very difficult to find unless you already knew your way through the collections. And so the task of this cataloging project has been to describe these items in collaboration with our academic partners, as we don't have the expertise in-house in the library to describe them properly. And I want to say that this has been a tremendous success so far. We have now just under 200 of approximately 600 cataloged. And so now that we're in this moment of being about a third of the way through, it seemed like a good time to reflect on the project and what we've discovered in the collections. And to that end, I've asked Professor Felek and Ayşe to join us to speak about their work with these materials, and because it is their subject expertise that is driving this success and allows us to proceed with these materials. So with that kind of bare bones introduction, I want to proceed to my first question, which is to you, Özgen. Could you pick up the narrative and tell us more about how the project started?
Oh, hi. Sure. First of all, good afternoon. Hi, everyone, and thank you for inviting us to the Mondays at Beinecke series. It's such an honor to be part of it. Let me start, with my side of the story. I've been teaching Ottoman Turkish at Yale since spring 2016. Initially, my teaching relied heavily on archival materials, excerpts from online manuscripts, and personal selections that I gathered during my visits to manuscript libraries across Turkey, Europe, and the United States. But it became evident that students were lacking the invaluable firsthand experience of engaging with authentic, materials, and essential aspect for aspiring scholars, of course. So I went through the 3 catalog Turkish collections you just mentioned to locate primary Turkish source materials for my language instruction. While examining each manuscript, I categorized them based on their content and level of complexity, ranging from beginner to advanced proficiency levels. In 2019, in the fall semester, I incorporated these uncatalogued Turkish manuscripts into the curriculum. Based on their academic interest and language skills, I assigned a relevant manuscript to each student. And this is how a selected volume of these hidden collections found their first readers. After classes ended, the same semester, Robin Doddery, the Middle Eastern librarian at Yale, and I organized a symposium in December 2019 again, where my students and I shared our findings with scholars and curious readers. After classes ended, that was the first time Beinecke's hidden Turkish manuscripts were introduced to the academic world as a whole. And the symposium was attended by a crowd of attendants, not only from Yale, but also from the neighboring universities such as Brown, Columbia, and NYU. The symposium highlighted the wonders of these collections and also called attention to the fact that they were under and undescribed. Inspired by the enthusiastic response, I approached the Beinecke Library to start cataloging these collections. Michelle Light, the new director of the library, welcomed the idea. She was very supportive. And as a result, in September 2022, as you mentioned, Agnieszka, a collaboration between Yale faculty and librarians was initiated to create original cataloging records for these manuscripts. Here, I would like to may I say one more thing? I would like to thank my students in fall 2019. If this project has come true, it is also thanks to their willingness to cooperate. Here you can see their names and the manuscripts they examined throughout the semester, and wherever they are, they all graduated. I wish them all the best. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Özgen. And if we can continue on this theme of student involvement in this, Ayşe, since you are the one who is actually sitting and doing much of the cataloging work and working through MARC and all of these things, could you tell us how you came to be involved and what your work looks like?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and interest. Özgen Hocam mentioned symposium, and like many researchers, the symposium brought to my attention the existence of this collection. After starting my PhD in history, I contacted Professor Özgen to inquire about the collections. Then I enrolled in her class and we had long conversations. about these manuscripts. However, due to the pandemic, in-person access to the library was unavailable. A year later, Professor Özgen suggested proposing a cataloging project to the head of the Beinecke, and I was very interested in contributing to the rediscovery of this hidden collection. And I believe that my previous work experience as a manuscript curator at Süleymaniye Library was the sign of my passion and interest into manuscripts. My task, my role, as outlined here, I have a manuscript in my hand, and I try to identify the title, author, date, scribe, a place of production of each manuscript. I also add brief annotations on the fly leaves and in the margins, if any. Once completed, I submit the record for Agnieszka's review. When all the record is finalized, I enter the data into the library system, and you all see it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ayşe. And as we move on to the next question, if we can get these slides to advance, this is a view of the cataloging queue that Ayşe is working through, along with Ahmed, who will be introduced later in the presentation. And now, so having talked a bit about process, I thought we might, and I having broadly mentioned the genres contained in the collections at the beginning, I wonder whether you two could speak to other aspects of the manuscripts that you think it's particularly important for our audience to understand about these materials, about their context. Özgen, I'd like to start with you, and I wonder if I could ask you to be a bit louder.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, sure, I'll try. It is of course, it's a significant collection with about 600 items. The manuscripts vary in date from the mid-15th to the beginning of the 20th century. As well as I mentioned, we have like one from 1933. We have 8 manuscripts from the 15th century, and the earliest item in the collection is dated 1458, which is very important. It is the İskendername, the Book of Alexander. Actually, the author died in 1412, and the text is, just, copied about 40 years after the death of the author. It's very close, actually, to the author. It's very significant in that sense. Also, this is a rather diverse collection in terms of its content. It's not only literary manuscripts. This is a very rich collection containing a wide range of genres. It contains faith, Islamic law. It contains prayer manuals, mysticism, poetry, chronicles, lexicons, collections of sermons, encyclopedia, biographical dictionaries of poets and scholars. It truly covers a spectrum of Ottoman culture and intellect. And it contains not only codices, but also non-codex formats. Some examples are a Ruzname that you mentioned, right? The Book of Days, which is a set of calendar tables in the Islamic and Rumi calendars and other useful information. And we have 3 imperial decrees, one of which was signed by Sultan Abdulaziz, and the other 2, were signed by Sultan Abdülhamid II. And we have 7 junks. Junks are personal anthologies with the favorite poems, stories, daily notes, significant dates of the junk keeper. And also there are, some of them are not manuscripts. They are just Xerox copies of the manuscripts from microfilms. I think it is also important to mention here that there's a distinct sub-collection. The Hartford Seminary Miscellaneous Collection hosts 21 manuscripts owned by John Kingsley Birch. Birch was an early 20th century scholar who was the author of an influential book titled the Bektashi of Dervishes. The book is a significant source for the Bektashi order in the late Ottoman and early Republican period, and we discovered that this collection, his collection, manuscript collection, is in the Beinecke thanks to Professor Bill Hickman, who is at the UC Berkeley, and also here I would like to say hi and thank you to him. Thank you.
And Ayşe, what about you?
What excites me most about this collection is its potential to reveal surprises for researchers as we continue cataloging. You mentioned we did about 200, so we don't know the rest. And for example, the collection contains a copy of Tercüme-i Cedide, a text on herbal remedies with only a handful of known copies worldwide. The collection holds some manuscripts with multiple copies, which is invaluable for researchers studying the history and circulation of specific texts. Also, collection includes a number of unidentified manuscripts awaiting scholarly exploration. Another significant aspect of this collection is Beinecke Library's policy of allowing researchers to access the physical copies of the manuscripts. This grants researchers the opportunity to examine the material aspects of these manuscripts, binding, ink, paper, illustrations. So such examination could lead to new research questions, especially for scholars working on European manuscript culture. So you are all welcome at Beinecke Library and see this amazing collection.
So thank you both for that introduction, and I apologize for skipping slides a little too early. And this leads very naturally to my next question, as you can see from the slide. So we've cataloged some amazing manuscripts, and I'm grateful to you for introducing me to them in the last year and a half. And I wonder if you can tell me about one or two of your favorites. Starting with you, Ayşe, if you may.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is not an easy question, and it is not easy to decide, but I have two. Then my first favorite is, yes, this one. This is the first manuscript we catalog. This is Turkish MSS Supplement 6, Tercüme-i Cedide, written by Mustafa bin Ali, who was active around 17th century. And as you see here, each page includes colored illustrations of plants on top of the page. We see here and their medical properties, and provides recipes to cure diseases. It includes a glossary providing plant names. I think it is the next slide. Oh yeah, this one. So you see Turkish, Arabic, and Italian names of plants. And it has charts of medical plants and their creative properties. It has some interesting remedies for infertility, as far as I remember, headache, among others. My second favorite is Turkish MSS Supplement 257. Yes, this one. This is a Persian Turkish dictionary written by İbrahim Dede. The title Kitab-ı Şahidi. It has one of the interesting bindings, and as I remember, this is the only metal binding that we have. We see upper board covered in chased metal, depicting two peacocks standing in vegetation, and also it has a full page of, I think the next slide, yes, this one, interesting illuminated portrait of a man, and there's no clue about him in the manuscript, in the margins, so that awaits further scholarly investigation. Yeah, I can't say more. What about you, Özgen Hocam? What are your favorites?
Well, Ayşe, as you said, it's really hard to say this one is my favorite because they each hold beauty and significance in their own ways. One that is particularly captivating for me is İskendername, as being the earliest we have, like we mentioned a few times in the last 20 minutes. There's a poetry collection which I find quite interesting, not because of its physical features nor the poems in the text, but because of the use of its fly leaves by an artistic-minded owner. This is a collection of poems by different poems, but it seems that one of the owners of the manuscript used it as a sketchbook and drew and painted some really cute ship images. Usually what we see on fly leaves are personal notes about, let's say, the birth of a baby or the death of a beloved one in the family, or commentary on the text. But this is the first time I have seen drawings of several ships on fly leaves. I think this is very cool. It shows how manuscripts were received by some readers and owners, or what functions they gain, manuscripts gained in different hands. The other item I found amusing but also sad is the Şahugeda, which is a mystical romance in Ottoman Turkish. Although most of the manuscripts are in good condition and have been preserved in an ideal environment in the Beinecke, these two copies we have were heavily damaged by bookworms. On the upper left side, I think everyone can see, you can see a commonly used like little tiny phrase in Islamic manuscripts, ya kebikeç. It was believed that this charm protected books against bookworms, but as you can see, it didn't work, unfortunately, for these two. Like everyone, I heard of the term bookworm, but I had no idea how crazy bookworms might go. And I still remember the moment I saw them. I was shocked, and I was like well reminded of the importance of manuscript preservation. What about you, Agnieszka? What is your favorite Turkish manuscript as a medieval Europeanist?
So for me, it is coming up. Here we go. It's the copy of the Marifetname, and I noticed that there were some questions in the Q&A about maps, which we'll get back to properly at the end, but we do indeed have some examples of Ottoman understanding of the world. And this Marifetname, our copy, was produced in 1790, about 10 years after the death of the author, Ibrahim Haki Erzurumi. And it's phenomenally illustrated. I honestly had a hard time picking images from this because there are also astronomical images. There's lots of mathematics. There are depictions of the geography of the heavens and things like that. And I'm fond of this because it's just stunningly beautiful. But there's also two other kind of neat connections. One is that it was given to Yale by Thomas Marston, who's a Yale grad of class of 1927, who later becomes our first curator of medieval and Renaissance literature, which is obviously more in my usual domain, and I'm more familiar with the Marston manuscript series. And so it's wonderful to see him crop up in a different space. But the other thing is that this is also one of the first Turkish manuscripts that I was able to learn about, and thanks largely to the Beinecke blog post that you wrote, Özgen, a few years ago, and I would encourage everyone to check that out. And I've mentioned already that I have had the privilege of seeing these manuscripts and many others with you. And I would encourage, again, as Ayşe mentioned, I'd encourage you all in the audience to come join us here in the reading room, or if you're unable to come here physically, to request scans of the items that you're interested in. But so if those things are, I would like to think the barriers to entry on both of those fronts have been lowered over the years through a lot of work by our partners here at the Beinecke. But I wonder if we can talk about, following these high points and this sense of welcome, could you both talk about some of the challenges that you've encountered in dealing with these manuscripts? I'm starting with you, Ayşe, please.
So this work involves multiple processes, and some of which can be quite challenging, especially at the very beginning. For instance, some manuscripts have author or title notes, but they are recorded in Arabic transliteration format, so I couldn't use them. And in many cases, Professor Özgen and I start from scratch, reading some portions of the text, consulting secondary sources, and researching libraries in the States and Turkey. We also reach out to experts and librarians for assistance with specific inquiries. Overall, the cataloging process requires significantly more research than one might initially assume, I can say that. Another initial hurdle was familiarizing myself with mark cataloging rules, and computer programs like OCLC, Voyager, and Agnieszka provided training sessions in different departments at Beinecke and introduced me to library cataloging guidelines. After that, I spent a considerable amount of time transforming the information gathered on the manuscript into a standardized format using specific terminology. And it was challenging in the beginning. Now, after a year of experience, I find myself working more efficiently than the beginning, thanks to the cooperation with our friends and colleagues.
And before turning it over to you, Özgen, I just wanted to tell everybody that the progress that Ayşe has made is really phenomenal. It took us, if I remember right, from September to January to get our first set of 25 manuscripts done, and then the second set of 25 were done in 2 months. So I think Ayşe is underplaying her own efficiency a little bit there. But Özgen, I wonder if you could comment on the things that you have found challenging.
And I second you actually about Ayşe as being very hardworking. Often Agnieszka and I joke that Ayşe is the machine. I mean, cataloging machine. We are very grateful for you actually, to you Ayşe, for this. About challenges, I would say I agree with Ayşe. I mean, but I would say on my part, incomplete manuscripts. First of all, it's surely time-consuming and challenging to examine a complete manuscript, a handwritten text, meticulously. You need to define its physical descriptions, marginal annotations, calligraphy, illuminations. Sorry, just 1 second.
While we're waiting for Özgen to rejoin us, I might say just for my own part, one of the challenges has been that I am trained in cataloging Western materials, obviously, and our cataloging standards are also generally written for Western materials. And so we had a lot of conversations at the beginning, both with Özgen and with Robin Daugherty, the Middle Eastern librarian, to figure out how do you apply these Western standards to a different set of materials whose, I don't know if inappropriateness is maybe not the right word exactly, but those cataloging standards, for instance, depend on a chronological division at about 1600, which has everything to do with when the printing press came to the West. And that is not relevant in this, that happens on a different chronology for these materials. And so from my end, those are the kinds of challenges. But Özgen, I wonder if you wanted to pick up your thought about completeness and incompleteness.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I apologize, everyone. Sorry about that. As I was talking about how, it takes time, a lot of time to define like each manuscript. I mean, we are talking about complete manuscripts. And we need to talk about calligraphy, illuminations, illustrations, stamps, and text content. On top of that, there's an additional level of complexity when a manuscript is missing the beginning or end. That means there's no context to the manuscript either. You don't know the author, you don't know the copyist, you don't know the translator. You may not even know the title or the date when the manuscript was penned. What you have is a mysterious text. If a text is, if a manuscript is missing the beginning and end, it is like starting to read a book from the middle and trying to figure out, which book it is. It's truly a challenge. The other challenge, I would say, is the compilations of several texts, which are called mejma. For example, we have a mejma in Hartford Seminary Miscellaneous Collection. It contains 18 different texts with lengthy commentaries in the margins, and each text has a different author, different date. Some of them, were written by the same hand, some not. I'm sorry, to be able to catalog such manuscripts, one requires meticulous attention to locate and identify all the names, seals, stamps, dates throughout the manuscripts. If those are missing, there is an additional layer of complexity added to the process. Sorry. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. And I wonder, as we're slowly kind of getting to the end of the questions, thinking about one of the things we're doing, obviously, in cataloging these is to make them available to enable further research. But of course, one of our numbers currently in Europe conducting research of her own on 17th century Ottoman North Africa in the early modern Mediterranean, excuse me. And I wonder, Ayşe, if you would take this moment to reflect a bit on how this cataloging work informs your work as a scholar.
So my training as a historian has instilled me a deep appreciation for the importance of primary sources in research. And throughout my work in Ottoman and European archives, I delve into different sorts of materials, correspondences, ambassadorial accounts, chronicles, treaties. And I feel that, as you see, like, I am so happy to see some of the French documents here. So I feel that engaging directly with these historical artifacts have been an enriching experience. Also providing historical content and context for such sources forms the basis of research. In any research, if you are working on a poet or a diplomat or a specific text, you need to first define your sources. And I think this methodology closely aligns with the approach that we use in our cataloging project. And also this project allows me to refine my research skills. I mentioned earlier, it requires a considerable time to research. And also I learned more about Ottoman intellectual history, art history, literature, and material culture. And I consider it as an integral part of my academic development and future plans. Also, as a researcher, I'm always mindful of researchers and trying to look from their perspective, and accessing historical sources can be often a complex undertaking. It requires significant time, effort to navigate. So I hope to contribute to the research of other scholars, and I hope at the end it will serve this purpose.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And I think to finish up on this note of academic generosity, we have one question planned. I will, in the interest of answering all the questions in the Q&A, I think maybe I'll just address this directly to point out that this, as much as there are three of us already talking about the collaborative aspects of this project, there are a whole host of other folks who have been actively involved, who have helped in various ways, been incredibly generous with their time. And we want to call out in particular Ahmed Tahir Noor, who's a PhD candidate here in religious studies, who joined us to catalog in this past fall and brings a great deal of knowledge about legal texts in particular, but a whole host of other things as well. Yasemin Sönmez, who's a calligrapher and a PhD candidate in art history based in Istanbul, has been incredibly generous in helping us identify scripts, any number of other things. Robin Doherty, again, who we've mentioned a few times already, has been instrumental in getting this project off the ground. Ivan Kropf, who's the curator at Islamic manuscripts at the University of Michigan, who has been incredibly generous with her time in answering all sorts of questions. A colleague of hers, Kevork Bardakjan, has also been helping us with the Armenian manuscripts specifically, and I could go on, and I'm sure Ayşe and Özgen could as well, but the many people who we've been able to ask questions of and who have even figured out where these books physically are, which has been incredibly helpful. But I think on that note, since we're kind of moving along in time, if Ayşe and Özgen, if you're both okay with this, we'll move to the Q&A, and I will read the questions that have come in and let you take them as you feel comfortable. And for our audience, we would love to hear more of your questions. Please feel free to add them to the Q&A and we will work through them. But does that, Ayşe and Özgen, does that sound good to you as a plan? Yeah, okay, great. So I mentioned before that there were some questions about maps, and I will condense these slightly. There was one question just broadly about what Ottoman maps are in the collection, either printed or manuscript. And related about that is more generally, what information is there in the collections, or what kind of texts that speak to Ottoman geographic knowledge? And I wonder if either of you wants to speak to that.
Oh, maybe I can jump in. So we have Acayipnames, right? I mean, it is they're kind of like talking about, you know, wonderlands, you know, other lands. And also we have as far as I remember, like, so we have also like a map, right, in Arabic. Is it in Arabic collections? I can't remember right now. We also have an Ottoman map. And we were just looking it up, but I can't remember, sorry, the call number right now. And we have Marifetname, which talks about, which has some geographical aspects. Other than this, I can't think of right now. I mean, probably not. Oh, we have, for example, we have Menasiknames, actually, like, you know, the pilgrimage guide. So sometimes they talk about, you know, the pilgrimage locations, if this could be considered kind of like, you know, pieces for geography. And if I remember, I will jump in again. So these are the things I can immediately remember.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry.
There are, sort of related to this, there are two questions about portolan charts. Are there manuscripts dealing specifically with the Ottoman equivalent of the Portuguese and Majorcan and Genoese portolans of the 15th century? And to my knowledge, we don't have those. Like, we don't have any of these large navigational maps, do we?
As far as I know, not in the Ottoman collection, but I'm not, you know, I'm not sure about the Arabic and Persian collections.
Right. Then there are a few questions about cataloging. One is about and I will kind of take chair's privilege and take this one, but one is, will the cataloging standards you developed for these materials be shared more broadly with institutions with similar collections? And I would be happy to share whatever material we've created and talk to whoever is working through similar kinds of problems. And I imagine, I don't mean to speak for both of you, but we've been so helped in our work by the generosity of others that we'd be happy to share these things if there is interest. I don't think at this stage there's any plans to publish it as such. For the catalogers in the audience, we're working on a modified version of AMRAM and deciding that partially around that, ignoring the division at 1600 and deciding that because of the way these manuscripts were produced, AMRAM felt like a better fit, and to only use one cataloging standard also seems like an easier thing to do. There was also a question about whether we have noted manuscripts that were dismantled by dealers. And I'm happy to jump in on this, but I wonder if either of you have thoughts.
Not in the Ottoman collections, right? I don't remember anything in the Turkish collections, but you have an answer for that, right?
Yeah, so we generally don't have a great deal of provenance information for a lot of these, and I don't know that we have come across an Ottoman manuscript that has definitely been broken by a dealer. Even the collection of fragments we showed a photo of, and I'll see if I can kind of back up to it. That came from a particular purchase. We can tell you though this came through H.P. Krauss. I can't tell you, we just don't have the information on when it was broken. The one thing to note on this front is that the Otto Eggy collection, for those of you who work on fragments and broken books, that is nearly entirely available now to researchers. It's not within scope for this project, but if you're interested in that kind of thing, more generally, I would encourage you to look at that. And then this is a final cataloging question, is one, can you speak more to how you have handled describing fragments? And I think this goes back to your question, your comment about the challenges of partial manuscripts. And the question continues, particularly fragments that you might not be able to identify the text. how do you handle the semi or fully unidentified manuscripts?
Well, actually, we haven't started like cataloging the fragments yet, right? We are not there yet, but we also, likewise, we are saving the mejmuas, these, compilations of several texts to the end, because it's, as we said, like, I mean, it's just like this, for example, this is like one book, but when you open it, it's like 18 books, 18 texts, maybe like 10 texts. So even if it looks like we are cataloging one text, in real, actually, you are cataloging more than like maybe 5-10 texts. So we are saving those to the end. So far, I was brave enough actually to jump into that, Turkish MSS 51, as far if I remember correctly, that text. So the answer is that we are not, doing those yet. But sometimes we look at we read lines and then try to locate, first of all, try to identify the context. And thank God there's something called Google. So sometimes, I mean, and there's a long debate in Turkey that PhD students or master students are transliterating Ottoman text into Latin scripts. So there are some arguments that this is kind of useful, but now actually Ayşe and I sometimes talk about it, how useful these, studies, these transliterations for us, and thank God they are, available online. So when you type up like, maybe like a verse, sometimes like 2-3 lines from a prose work, they just pop in actually on Google. So then you find this text and then we read the rest of the previous or the following pages to locate if this specific folio belongs to this text or not. So these are helpful. Right now, this is what we are doing. But as I said, we are saving those to the end. After we finish the complete manuscripts, we will start dealing with these challenging ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to piggyback on this, even the fragment collection that we're looking at now, that's also going to come at the end. So many of these books have been undescribed for such a long time that we're trying to get through. The priority is to get through the easier things first, to get as many of them more easily discoverable as possible. And then, as Özgen said, we'll dive into the things that are more complicated.
May I add something here? Maybe
Please.
we can talk about like in how in the very beginning, like 1.5 years ago when Ayşe first started, I think also we did the same thing with Ahmet Tahir. So we use, the text with multiple copies, to train, students, because it's much easier to be able to identify a text if the text has like more than one copy in the library. Maybe we can just briefly mention that we started with the easiest ones, which are the ones with multiple copies. And we are saving these actually very unique, single folios to the end.
Yeah. And maybe thinking back to the early days of our cataloging, another question, Ayşe, there have been a few questions about the Tercüme-i Sadice that you mentioned, the herbal remedy book. And one question is whether you could talk about some of the herbs that are present in that book and that are described there. And another question that's much more specific is whether you know whether the use of herbs in that book are comparable to ones that have been established in Chinese traditional medicine, though I know that this will get a bit outside your realm of expertise. So again, what are the herbs in that book, and do you know anything about comparison to Chinese practice?
Yeah, the first part of question is easy because I read some of them like mint, parsley, oregano, lavender, this kind of herbs that we still have and use. And like for the second part, unfortunately, my knowledge on these herbal treatments and manuscripts are very limited. But I would encourage you to just send an email request the copy, because Italian names are listed in the end. And you may also read the full list, because it is about more than 200 pages. And if you just email them, they can send you the full copy, and you can also see the the full list of herbs in the manuscript. Yeah.
Thank you. So there are a couple of questions about digitization, and I'll take that myself. And the questions are asking whether there are plans to digitize the collection systematically, and are we digitizing the texts and documents in a standardized and systematic manner at 300 DPI or 600 DPI? We do not, there is no digitization as part of this cataloging project. However, Beinecke does digitize on patron demand. So if any of you are looking for copies of any of these manuscripts, the easiest way to find this page is to Google Beinecke reproduction orders, and it'll take you to a page that allows you to indicate the quality that you want. So if what is sufficient is a color PDF, we can do that. If what you need is 600 DPI meeting a IIIF standard, we can do that. Most things we will digitize for free. I think the current turnaround time is 10 to 14 weeks, and our colleagues in digitization do a really phenomenal job with all of this. So one, currently patron-driven, two, generally free, and we're hoping that eventually these will get systematically digitized, but we haven't actually engaged in any conversations with our colleagues about actually getting that sorted out. Then there were two questions sort of related about the materiality, and I wonder if either of you could speak to this. One is if we could talk about the paper. We have a listener who is curious about paper making in the Ottoman Empire. And another was asking about the techniques, the Ottoman marbling techniques for the book bindings. And I wonder if either of you feel comfortable addressing either of those.
Yeah, I think recently we cataloged several manuscripts with a marbled cover in the binding. Mm-hmm. And there are different colors, different, illustration, the different motifs of it. I think our collection has a great number of manuscripts that if you are looking at just, marbling method, you can compare them looking different centuries. And also the paper, there are different colors, different, thickness and watermarks. If there's any visible one, we note that different colors, as you see in these slides, there are a kind of light color, different color. So we have also great variety of papers. Some are European papers in the manuscripts. And looking at, of course, as an expert, maybe you may have better understanding of the process of production, but I'm not aware of the paper production process in the Ottoman Empire.
And then maybe like Ayşe, I think you might remember that some texts were, some papers were purchased, some papers were European, right? We were talking about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ayşe, do you want to elaborate on that at all? Or if not, I can jump in for a minute.
As far as I remember, also there are some gilded papers. They are shiny and very light. But yeah, please go ahead if you'd like.
Yeah, so one of the things that's been interesting for me, again, as a Europeanist, is seeing the different qualities of paper. And you do have a fair amount of Italian paper, especially in kind of the 15th and 16th century, mostly the 16th century, let's say, in our 16th century Ottoman manuscripts. And you can tell partially because of chain lines and watermarks and just the texture of the paper. There was apparently a good market for Italian paper in the Ottoman Empire because Italians broadly were considered to make excellent paper. The other thing that I've really enjoyed about getting close with the paper in these manuscripts is that we have a manuscript that is, I believe, late 19th century, and unfortunately forget which one specifically. But you can tell that the book has been rebound for various reasons, but one of them is that the spine support is a piece of paper whose watermark refers to the Turkish Republic. And so that binding has to post-date 1928, which I think is an incredible bit of of book history and material deduction.
Agnieszka, may I say something here?
Yeah, please.
So talking about the unusual bindings, maybe like, you know, different bindings. So I mean, we had brought the image of the compilation of Bektashi poets. So remember, like the binding actually has a Jesus, you know, the image of Jesus. And so it's, I mean, when you look at the text from the cover, from the binding, you might assume that it's a Christian text, but when you open the text, actually it's a, you know, Muslim text, you know, including hymns in Turkish. So probably there are some maybe like trading issues. We don't know actually, maybe like we don't know what's, but then there are some interesting pieces like, you know, regarding not only paper, but also binding.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things we haven't had a chance to get into. And I don't know that we have the images for this right now, but just seeing the bindings has also been fascinating because there are Western bindings in the collection, there are Islamic bindings in the collection, and figuring out what you call all of these, what conclusions you can draw from them has been part of the fun. So we have a few minutes remaining. Maybe we'll take one last question. Tobias, I wonder if I could ask for your help. If I see somebody has raised their hand, I can allow them to talk. So Mary Jane Dannon, if you're there and would like to speak, I think you can join us. If you would unmute. Okay, maybe not. I'll take
So may I mention like briefly
please.
something here while waiting for Mary Jane? So there's a great interest actually growing in Islamic manuscripts. Very recently, the Beinecke library is not the only one actually. There are some other, you know, uncatalogued hidden Turkish manuscripts in the Balkans. And very recently, these collections are, you know, being discovered and cataloged, and I thought, you know, I think I saw in the comments that also UCLA has just started cataloging the Islamic, you know, collection, which is amazing. So it's one of the largest collections. So I'm happy that we're also doing, you know, just timely. Mm-hmm.